Welcome to the Sensible Center podcast, where two middle-aged guys drunkenly talk politics and political reform. Grab an adult beverage and enjoy the show. Further information can be found at sensiblecenterpack.com. You can reach us at sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com or follow us on X at USASCPack. Hey, Bob. How you doing? Welcome to podcast. I'm calling it Podcast 2.0.
The immigration special tonight, right?
That's right. So for our long-time listeners, we're going to try something new going forward for a little while here. We're going to focus on a single topic or issue rather than kind of doing an overview of everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks, because that becomes a little bit overwhelming, especially with the amount of stuff coming down the chute. So we're going to trade back and forth as to who gets to pick the topic. And tonight, Bob, it was Bob's pick. And what was your pick again, Bob?
Immigration. We're going to talk over immigration. I think we've got 3 or 4 topics to discuss.
Yeah, we got, there's a lot going on here. So I don't know if you want to start. I actually pulled some fun facts because I wanted to see if there was a number out there. You know, how many illegal immigrants kind of we currently have in our country. And the best figures I can find were from, like, I don't know if you looked them up, was from like 2022. I don't know if the Biden stopped counting at some point.
Yeah, I heard Biden let in something like 3 million.
Yeah, there's like in the last couple of years, there's been between 2 and 3 million a year. So in 2022, it was 11 million. So the best I could come up with, it's probably 15, 16 million illegals, because there's some that left. Let's just say 15, because it was 11. It's actually been 11, believe it or not. Most of the illegals came in during the Bush administration. Obama did a decent job. Just, you know, he wasn't doing catch and release. He was sending people back. They actually called him the deporter-in-chief at some point, right?
Yep.
Because there were encounters. There were a good number of encounters, but he was sending them back. It's really, and then I think during the first Trump administration, the number kind of stayed steady. He kind of benefited from COVID, where we saw a big drop-off in encounters. But I pulled some facts.
So you're saying 15 million in 2022.
And overall, I pulled some things from USA Facts. In 2023, can you guess what percentage of foreign-born residents were in the U.S. population?
Probably between 4.5% and 5%. Well, foreign-born or illegals?
Foreign-born residents.
Oh.
I was surprised at how high it was. So this includes illegals.
I would say 15%.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's 14%. That was in 2023, so it's probably a bit higher now with the increase in illegals in 2023. So
yeah, because my calculations are, if you calculate 16 in 2022 at the approximate number of people, that would make about 4.8% of the population illegal immigrants. That's that's a large percentage of illegals. It's somewhere between. So there's probably an equation out there that will tell you if 4.8% of your population are illegal immigrants making what I will call slave wages, what percentage does that lower your overall wage level?
There you go. I don't know. Well, speaking of work, so the primary reason people come here is to work, right? And they have, although they're 14% of the population, they're 18% of the jobs are taken by foreign-born, which is sort of interesting. And I think it's kind of historically, as I was reading about this, prior to like the last couple of years where migration has more been families fleeing Central America, it used to be single young males, mostly from Mexico and some from China and India, to work, right? So that's kind of shifted too. So that would make sense why a larger percentage of the jobs are taken. So almost 20% of the jobs are held by foreign-born um, population, which is interesting. Mostly, heavily in education and health services, which is kind of interesting. I would imagine agriculture's a big part too, but I think they do temporary visas for agriculture. So that kind of gives kind of the scale of what we're talking about. So it's a pretty large scale. Um, I could go further. I looked up. There are there's illegal and legal entry. So legal entry, you could come through a green card for permanent residency, a temporary visa with a specific period and purpose, or through the refugee or asylum process for those fleeing persecution or violence, which I think is what has happened in the last 2 or 3 years. Um, so that kind of gives a sense of how much of the U.S. population is foreign-born and how important immigration. I think it's always been. I mean, we're a land of immigrants, right? Can we agree on
Yeah.
that?
So let me say that in 2015, actually 2017, $150 billion a year were sent from the United States to other countries in remittances.
Okay.
So, do you happen to know what the current GDP is, or it was in 2017? I guess I could look that up.
It's pretty big.
It's got to be in the trillions, right?
Right. Well, if our debt is like 120% now, I'm guessing it's over 20. I think 23 or 24 trillion now. So it was probably say 20 trillion then.
All right. So we take, what did I say, 150 billion?
Yeah. So it's a drop in the bucket to that.
Divided by.
So you have a problem
20.
with money leaving the country? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, what I'm saying is we've established that, well, we haven't established, but I said that illegal immigrants making wages that are minimum wage or in probably many cases less lowers the wage base for Americans, right? I mean, it's a fair argument.
You've always focused on the effect on wages, which
It
I
makes the
don't
poor
hear
people
I
that
don't
live
hear
here poorer.
often. I don't hear often because we've had such low unemployment here. I know you're saying that it's not. Um, I just don't think, at least from the studies, I didn't pull any studies. At least from what I've read in the past, I don't think it has had that great an effect on wages. Simply because I don't think Americans often are either trained or willing to do the jobs. I know you always say, well, if you pay somebody $100 an hour to pick lettuce, they'll work that job, right?
Hmm.
I don't necessarily think that's the case. Plus, no one would pay.
I wouldn't do it for 20 an hour, but I'd do it for 100. I would do it for.
No one would pay $50 for a head of lettuce. So it doesn't really work that way. The price of the good is kind of the price of the good. Obviously, we've had inflation recently, but big increases like that, I would say on the margin, possibly, but I think the effect is much smaller than you typically think it is. Um, Simply because I don't think there's a lot of competition for working in a chicken processing factory per se. And I would say definitely I would be more concerned less with the illegal immigration than the legal immigration on that front, especially because those are more skilled jobs typically
Yeah, those are your white
coming
collar
through
jobs generally. Yeah.
the H-1B visas. Um,
Oh, they
I would be
absolutely.
more concerned about foreign students coming here. Uh, when I went back to school, most of the class I was with were Chinese immigrants coming here for their PhD for a PhD program. They'd get a bachelor's or a master's from a university in China and then come here on a visa to get a PhD, competing against American students for slots at schools.
Yep.
I think on the low end, there's some of that, but I don't think it's as great a difference. I think on the tech jobs, the H-1B visas are very important. But yeah, there's going to be an effect on wages. But
I'll tell you what we're doing. I mean, more and more what you're seeing is a lot of corporations hiring people that live and work from India remotely because they cost about a third of what a U.S. worker costs, right? So you can get 3 Indian nationals working from India remotely for the price of 1 here.
Sure.
So, and that is definitely costing labor. And now that's not necessarily an immigration issue. But you get these H-1Bs coming over, and it is that, if we were to allow unlimited H-1Bs, which we don't today, it would definitely affect our wages. I think it's probably already affecting wages for white collar workers, especially in the tech sector or the anything STEM.
Yeah, and I think we saw at the beginning of this administration that a lot of especially Elon and some of the tech people wanted expansion of the H-1B, right?
And so let me ask you this. You've got an orchard, I don't know, say blueberry field or an apple orchard or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
And all of a sudden your source of illegal wages or illegal labor dries up. What are you going to do? Are you going to let the apples rot on the tree? Or are you going to find a wage that American citizens will take to pick your apples? What's it going to be?
Maybe I get out of the apple business.
Maybe you do.
Maybe I sell the land and get out of the apple business. I understand your argument, and as we deport people and reduce our foreign-born population and become more focused on American workers, I think we're going to learn what the effects are. I mean, if it's followed through on the extreme, and let's say we export, either self-deport or forcibly deport millions of people, which I think was and still is the objective. I guess we'll see what a house costs. I guess we'll see how much. I think agriculture is a little different because I think they've worked through the farm bills and things like that where they're temporary visas. There's actually a separate visa for temporary seasonal ag employees. So they don't necessarily stay here, and I think they kind of stay on top of that a bit on the agricultural side.
And again, their pay, though, and a large portion of their pay is going back to whatever country they came from, especially if they're going back with it, right?
Right.
So
it's not
it's money that leaves the country.
It is. It's part of our GDP that doesn't get recycled within our country, so it'll affect, economically to some extent.
Based on my calculation, it's about 1% of GDP probably, which isn't huge, but it's still significant, or at least relevant.
Well, from my economics background, Bob, 2 things grow GDP. Do you know what they are?
Oh, you're testing me here. Let me think about this.
Well, we're talking about one.
Labor?
Sort of. Well, population growth.
Yeah, population growth. Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
And then productivity. That's it. That's the only thing that affects GDP.
Well, population growth, the only way that's going to grow, it seems like nowadays, is
right.
Immigration.
We've got negative. That's why I said we actually need more. I think we need more legal immigration. We need to. Everything I hear anecdotally and through people who've tried to get family over, it's not easy to immigrate to this country legally. I don't know if you've heard the same thing.
Productivity can be captured 2 ways, though, right? At least, because you've got efficiency,
right,
and then you've got new products.
Well, you have technology,
new services, new tech. Yeah, well, yeah. If somebody invents something, it's new.
Right.
Or you have a new crop or whatever it happens to be. Yeah, exactly. Or efficiency. Some of that's going to be made up if you lose the population growth through things like robotics, right? Maybe not in an apple orchard, but in a blueberry field, sooner or later you're just going to have a robot going through. And
so your theory is if you don't have that cheap labor there, and you're going to have to hire more expensive labor, you're induced to spend money on capital equipment or some type of technology to increase.
Yep.
I buy that. I mean, I buy that. So net, I guess you're saying we can end up in the same place. I'm just saying we're probably not going to increase the employment in Americans at a higher wage, because I think at the end of the day, the price is the price, and we'll end up getting the fruit from somewhere else in the world that has a cheaper labor force, right? I don't think we're going to necessarily increase American wages unless we then tariff everything that comes into this country, right? Which is kind of what Trump's trying to do.
Well, there's some point where, I don't know, somebody's got to clean offices and houses, and that's not a job I would want, right? If you want me to clean for you, you're going to have to pay me a lot. It's probably well north of $100 an hour. And I wouldn't want to do it all day, but if I could get $150, $200 an hour or more to do it, I might pick up that after my normal day job, just because that's pretty good money, right?
Right. I mean, interesting, like here in Wisconsin, where there's not that much what I would call immigrant population, it is hard to get stuff done. I mean, we're fairly rural to begin with, but trying to find somebody to, I mean, we were just talking about it the other day, either a contractor or somebody to clean your house. You wouldn't believe how hard it was to find somebody to clean our house.
I get it, and then they're expensive. Yeah.
Oh, they were ridiculous prices,
and they may not do a great job either.
Exactly. So yeah,
steal your stuff or both. Yeah.
I mean, I'm very much pro immigration. I don't know where you land. I'm not pro illegal immigration.
I'm fine with immigration. I like immigration. It's a good thing. Illegal immigration is not. And there's all kinds of problems it brings with it, right?
All right.
It was different. Europeans were coming over and they were not getting welfare support for them or their children, right? There's all kinds of benefits that are paid out by the government now for these people, granted probably more at state level from certain states than the federal government, but there's plenty coming from the federal government as well. That's an expense that is being paid out of my pocket that wasn't being paid back in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s.
Well, yeah, and we also had tenement houses, and I wouldn't say necessarily that was necessarily a good thing if you remember the squalor that many immigrants lived in when they came here, and I wouldn't say it was great. I don't think people should be permanently on that. I think transitional support, especially if we're doing a legal immigration or an asylum process, I think some support for a limited period of time. I also believe heavily in assimilation. That's one of the things I mean, in today's day and age, you could be accused of being a racist for this, but I do think people should assimilate quicker. And maybe
don't come over here waving your country's flag. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, things that upset me is like when I'm watching TV and I'm seeing Spanish-only commercials. I understand why they're doing it. They're appealing to a certain segment of the population. But that sort of upsets me. I don't know whether it upsets you, because I think it's more the assimilation thing. I think allowing people to speak a separate language as their primary means and making it easy for people to do that and not assimilating into the country. And I supported Trump, making English the official language of this country, because I think we're a melting pot, and I don't think we should be separate pots, right? I don't think the country works well.
Yeah, it's not going to work so well that way. I mean, you look at other countries that, like, we do generally have, at least historically, assimilation has been high here. right? When you look over to
Oh
Europe,
yeah,
for
I
instance, where they're having
definitely
some
think.
immigration issues.
I think that's something we've done very well in this country historically, and I don't want to see us lose that. And I think we are somewhat losing that. Maybe it's I'm more sensitive to it now, and I didn't see what it was like when we had huge waves of immigration back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, whether that occurred too. But I'm just sensitive to that because I think that, like you pointed out, that's something that we've done very well in this country, right?
Yeah.
Where the United
Historically,
States,
I
right?
mean, when I was a kid, I did not at all think about race. And maybe that's normal for normal kids or all kids, but I had people of all different ethnicities in my neighborhood and in my school,
Yeah, I mean,
and then
you make a good point there.
I never really thought about race. Wasn't really, I don't know, I just wasn't a thing. Even you're sitting there, I'm white, and you got a black kid sitting next to you. I really never even thought about why that person was a different color, right? What
Right.
is it? It just never really occurred to me at all. And I feel like now the news cycle is really trying to amplify a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely the identity politics and the identity, they're across various bases. And like I said, I don't think that's going to be helpful. That we're all segmented in our little silos and groups. I don't think this country works great when we start doing that. And I think, yeah, that's where the trend's been heading. Let's say the last 10 years or so.
I wanted to get back to immigration's effect on inflation as well, right?
Okay.
So you had mentioned how immigration potentially keeps inflation down because of the lower wages and the influx of labor to provide a lot of things like services or the not technical manufacturing and things like that. And I know it's not a one-to-one tie here. I know it's not a vacuum. A lot of things happened over the last 6 years or so. But we've had rapid inflation at a time where we had a rapid increase of immigration. And a large portion of that inflation could be attributed to shelter, right? Cars.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's been any studies of that, and I think the COVID impact on inflation and the attendant government spending, I think that's a great area to study to kind of separate it out. Why did this happen, and did the influx of immigrants drive that through eating up more resources? My guess is that would be a factor, but a small factor, simply because the numbers aren't that
Yeah,
big.
well, it's like remittances being 1% of GDP. Even if it's 1% of inflation, which 1% of what was inflation at its highest, maybe 7.5, 8%, at least by current methods of calculating it. Yeah, it's 1% of that. In the scheme of things, it's not a lot, but when you consider the compounding of it, it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I would put it similar to the wage effect. Yes, logic would tell me there's some effect, but my gut feeling is that the other effects would flood that effect on inflation. But like you said, yes, logically it makes sense. You've got more citizens here. You got more demand on resources, housing, cars. That maybe the system didn't, with a more gradual increase in population, you wouldn't see such a shock on those things. Yeah, it makes sense. I'd like to see somebody study it. Let's study it, Bob.
Have a form. Let's see if we
Let's
can.
let's
Let's see if we
let's
can get
write a
it.
grant. Let's
Yeah,
write a
let's get
grant.
it funded by the feds. That's what I was gonna say. Let's
Let's
study
get
it.
funded by the good. So I guess before we get into some of the more current things that Trump is doing in regards to immigration and deportation and some of the issues around that, I was kind of looking up the history just to kind of see how we've tried to solve the problem because I think we've known we've had a problem for quite a while, and I think it in recent history, I think Reagan was the last one to actually have a sort of a comprehensive immigration bill. So we're talking 40 plus years ago.
Yeah,
And
I blame Reagan for a lot of this stuff, to be honest with
well,
you.
I guess at the time, I don't remember it, but I guess they were trying to fix the border issues, um, and kind of stem the flow of migrants a bit, especially on the illegal end. But then it actually turned into more of an amnesty bill at the time, where people were here illegally, believe it or not.
Granted amnesty.
They granted amnesty.
We're going to lock down the border and not allow any of this anymore, and that's going to be our agreement. And then what happened?
Yeah, and I think that legacy is kind of hung over subsequent attempts, because I think, especially on the conservative side, they're very, it's been sensitive that they're going to give up something in regards to resolving the people who are here, either a path to citizenship, which is something that the last big effort after Reagan was Obama, basically, with the Gang of Four, and there was a path to citizenship, and we're going to toughen security, and
and put the electorate at risk too for conservatives, I think. Although
that bill actually passed the Senate by 68 to 32 with strong bipartisan support, believe it or not, back in 2013, under Obama.
I believe it.
And then Boehner wouldn't bring it up to a floor vote in the House at all. So you look at this.
That too.
Right. And then you look at what happened recently. I mean, I think we could both agree Biden really messed up on the immigration front. I think it cost them. I think it cost the Dems the presidency at the end of the day. And
I don't even know. I know it's way off topic. I don't even know if you can blame Biden with the fact that I do. I blame his administration. I'm not sure that he was mentally involved. I'm really not.
All right, so you're that's a backhanded compliment.
Thing is fascinating. This whole auto pen thing is fascinating to me. Like everything, if it was signed with an auto pen, is it still law?
We always said it was a weekend at Bernie's presidency, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
From the get-go.
If like the pardons of Hunter, for instance, if that was signed with an auto pen and he didn't actually sign it.
All right, we're getting off topic.
Is it real? It's a good topic for next time. But yeah, okay. Back to it. Immigration.
So Biden messed up, and then he got late to the game, right? He basically he eliminated everything that Trump did at the border, right?
Day one, he just came in and said,
all the emergency measures and all of that.
Executive orders. Yep.
Yeah, and then he started bringing people in, right? He did this temporary parole thing where he put people on flights, which I think the Supreme Court just issued a ruling today saying Trump can send them back.
Yeah, they did.
Which I'm
what
shaking my
head. What the Supreme Court said was an individual can challenge it on their own, but however the case was brought was not going to stand. But if you're, I don't know, Mark Sanchez, and you want to file suit on your own, you can do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't disagree. So that's kind of how we got to where we're at now. Now, Trump, I was looking up the numbers in regards to, did you see the numbers and counters at the border now? I mean, basically they're down to, although it was interesting.
Hundreds a month, basically.
I mean, Biden never got credit, but here, I'm looking at, this is from the government, Southwest Land Border Encounters, U.S. Custom and Border Protection Service. So it hit its height like in December 2023, where they were encountering about, now there were some that they didn't encounter at all. They were kind of just coming. These were actually people we stopped, so we could count them. Although I think that was the vast majority, at least from what I read.
I'm sure the ones that really didn't want to be seen would have found another path in.
Yes, but I think in the overall scheme of things, I think most of them were coming through and claiming asylum. So 300,000 in December of 2023. Then, amazingly, once Biden started running for president,
numbers sunk.
Yep. By January, by the summer, They fell to 130,000 in June. October was 106. Election time, that was 94,000. And then Trump has gotten it down. This is in a month, like 12 to 12,000, which is kind of historically low. So, hey, I'll give him credit. He's stopped, but
So
Biden was already
when there were hundreds of
was
thousands
already
of
on the
people
path.
pouring over the border like that,
Yep.
how many of those do you think were terrorists?
I have no idea, Bob.
Do you think it's greater than zero?
Of course, it's greater than zero.
How many of them were gang members? How many?
Greater than zero, too.
Yeah.
I would
You know,
say. I would say a vast majority were not.
How many of them were children that were being trafficked for illicit purposes?
I
How
would
many
say greater
died
than zero.
along the way in the desert or were raped?
Greater than zero.
Yeah. So
I'm not defending it.
do you think it was more than when last month when Trump was in office, or less?
No, I just said, I just gave him credit.
That's just it's.
So how is he doing
that?
So how is he doing that though, Bob? So I was reading about how he's doing it. I mean, he's using the military now.
Yeah.
He's getting some cooperation, but
and state support is the feds aren't refusing the state support anymore.
Do you realize he claimed area under the emergency measures? He's dedicated to establish military installations across our border.
Yeah, I remember hearing that back.
Because the theory is you can't. Technically, we can't use our military for enforcement actions. But if you have a military installation across the border and somebody crosses into the military territory, then you could have the military, detain them. I mean, it's genius. I don't know if that's the intent of our laws, but I was like, how's he using the military? And then I pulled, military loose, and I'm like, oh, this is how he did it. He kind of designated land as a military zone, and therefore he could station military down along the border. I think partly it's just, the message gets out there that don't come to America, right?
Yep.
Which I guess will stem the tide. I mean, I guess I haven't had much. That stem needed to be stopped. I guess I don't have too much issue with him stopping that tide, right? It's the question of now we've let people in. This government has, our government, our U.S. government, right? We did catch and release to a vast majority of people, right? Is that true? We did.
Well, there was
no
place
to
put them.
them.
In many cases, there was no place to put them, right? First of all, and that's why they ended up doing catch and release, because there were so many of them here we didn't have any beds left.
There was a reason why they were coming too.
Kids in cages. Obama had that.
Let's not forget there's a reason they were coming, right?
Okay. Regardless. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So if we say, going down the path you were heading, we let them in. Let's go ahead and just give them all amnesty, and if it doesn't suit the purposes of whatever the powers that be want, and we won't argue on whatever that might be, what's going to happen? Well, let's just go ahead and just let's bring more in. Let's bring more in. Let's bring more in. Wages will continue to fall. Housing and shelter and resources will continue to become more scarce. And the politicians are already rich or getting richer, both. And it ends up hurting the little guy more than anybody else. I mean, if you listen to interviews and read stories about the inner city poor people and the effect that these huge influxes of immigration into their area are having, it's not great. They're not happy. They don't have resources as it is, and now they're getting even more spread out.
When you're bringing in that many people a year and you're concentrating in certain areas, that they are going to have effects on certain areas, right? And most of it is within cities, I'm guessing. The larger urban areas, right? Which is where they'll go to work, or those basically the areas that can handle somewhat of an influx of immigration, either through putting them in hotels or whatnot. That I'm absolutely. I mean, that's the
Who's
past.
paying for those hotel stays?
But that's the past.
And then when you want to go visit New York City and can't get
Nobody's
a hotel
defending
room
that.
for under
But
$500 an hour, you're
nobody's
double paying.
defending that. Is there somebody defending that?
Or $1 to stay. I mean,
I never defended that. I thought it was a stupid policy. I said it from day one. There might be some liberals on the far extreme that will say we should have open borders and anyone who wants to come here should come here. But I don't think that's a mainstream view of either party. I don't know if.
So what are you defending? I mean, are you saying, because you've said they're already here now, so
They're already here. We let them in.
We let them in.
We did, right?
Well, I don't know about we. The Republicans tried to stop it.
Our government our elected officials let them in, right? Which is we. So they're here. So it's a question of, again, I support what he's done on the border. I would like, my main concern there is I don't hear anyone talking about actually reforming the system, because I do believe we should let people in with asylum claims. We should limit it. We should process them correctly, not catch and release. We should have a system available to people that they can either sign up beforehand. They don't come here and then apply. They can, get notice that their application's been accepted, or we do remote interviews. Some system that we still let people apply through an asylum system, because
remotely.
I just want to believe that that's a principle this country should still uphold.
I'm good
so I'd like
that.
to see that solved.
I completely agree with
right.
that. But
I'd like to see that. I don't hear anyone talking about that, though, so that's kind of concerning to me. And then the people here, definitely the criminals. But then we get into the key issues here, which is due process, right?
Yeah, so that's,
So under the 5th and 14th Amendment, our U.S. Constitution guaranteed due process to not all citizens, not who we like or don't like. It says all persons, regardless of their immigration status.
Okay.
So
what does it say? Regardless of? No, it says all people. That's all it says. Not
all
regardless
persons.
of immigration status or all persons. Okay.
It says all persons.
Yeah, it does. I've read it.
So then it's a question of, okay, so even if we believe somebody's from MS-13, right? We look at their knuckles, and we look at their tattoos, and we like, oh, they haven't committed a crime yet, but we think they're criminals, right? Do they get due process
illegally,
or not?
They're criminals.
Do they get due process?
I think
well, first of all, how do you know if they're here illegally?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, right? Because it puts us in a bad spot. I think you've got to better define due process, right? Do they get a month-long court case?
Well, the Supreme Court's actually holding the line pretty much on this. They are saying that they do get a chance. That's what I'm saying. We need to put something in place that, and I would suggest Congress
do it. It should not be. It's kind of like, in my eyes, due process, right? So if I get pulled over for speeding and I don't have my proof of insurance, I can go to court without having to go see the judge the next day or the next week and say, here's my proof of insurance. Sorry, it wasn't in my car, and they just throw it out, right? The same thing can be done very easily for these immigrations. Show me your social security card or your visa or your passport, right? Very simple. You don't need to go through all these court cases. Show me documentation you belong here. It's not hard to find. It should be very easy to look up on a list for anybody that's in the government to know that you're a citizen or not. Prove to me you're a citizen. Get out. Not this, well, see a judge and then come back in a month for the next hearing and then come back in a month for the next hearing. No.
Yeah, I don't know what happens in the courts. I mean, clearly I mean, here I'm looking at it. Undocumented immigrants can challenge government actions in court, including their detention and removal, and have the opportunity to present evidence and legal arguments. So, I guess the question is, you're saying there still has to be a process, right? And it should be a legal process, right? It shouldn't be presenting it to an ICE officer, right? Because that person represents. Well, then you don't have separation of church and state there, Bob. You're letting the executive branch take.
And I'm talking to you, and I'm trying to establish if you're a citizen or not. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my ID or give them my social security number or my passport and say, here's my proof I'm a citizen. And the ICE officer then has no grounds to arrest you.
You think that's happening? I'd like to know if it happens. I mean, clearly they've shipped some people out that probably shouldn't have.
People don't carry their passports around, right? So.
Well, that's what I said. Do I need to carry my papers?
Yes, to the officer, like, yeah, here's my social security number. Or here, here's my whatever. So
then we all should have to carry papers.
It's not like they're being put into a cell and left there for 2 weeks until they're deported, not given any chance to.
So you're saying we should all carry papers with us? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you're driving, you need to have a license with you, right?
Well, what if you're not driving? What if you're just walking down the street? Yep. This is what I said when I first heard the mass deportation thing. I said I'm going to have to carry my birth certificate with me.
I think probably in
my
those
passport.
Cases, if what immigration should be doing is giving them, here's establishing where they live, where they can be reached, whatever you can. Giving them a week, 2 weeks to prove that they're citizens, or they might just go ahead and admit, yeah, I'm not a citizen, or whatever. I'm not here illegally. Okay, and get them out.
But we should have a process established by law. If we're gonna do it an expedited process, right?
You have to.
So, legally, and then we should tell people what they need, right? I mean,
a
lot of people don't have passports. A lot of people don't have passports, and you could get a driver's license and not be a citizen. So those two things are probably out. A birth certificate. Some people born in a foreign country might not have a birth certificate. I don't know where my birth certificate's at. Mm-hmm. So, unless you're going to do
call your county clerk, Kevin.
I know, but you have to tell me that that's what I'm going to need to carry. Otherwise, I could be shooed out of this country and end up in an El Salvadorian prison. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, but you'd own it. You'd be like the prison boss.
I'd be OG. You imagine me rolling in there with those tattooed guys? I think he doesn't belong here. I would be the most obvious.
Better start doing pull-ups on the prison stairs. And
I know it's a far-fetched scenario that I would be. But there are people on the, or if he listens to this podcast, maybe it isn't so far-fetched. Stephen Miller gets a hold of our podcast. Next thing you know, they're rustling me out of my bed in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
I'm an enemy of the state.
Yeah, that MS-13 tattoo on your hand doesn't mean what it's mostly stupid, not whatever that stands
mostly
for.
Stupid, right?
Yeah. But
so we agree that there needs to be a process. It probably should look more expedited because realistically, we're not going to be able to handle this many people if we go through some long. Well, either that, or we got to.
If you look at what Trump's doing, he at this point is really targeting criminals, those in gangs,
right?
Those in, that are drinking and driving. They've got domestic abuse records, that sort of thing.
It appears to be the case because I think 130,000 is kind of the number I've heard. So
I think it's probably safe to assume. I know assume isn't going to stand up in court, but it's probably safe to assume these people, since they've already been charged with things and let go, have a well-established immigration status. right? I mean, they're well known to the courts already. So all that research has been done.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. I read somewhere in my research here that there's 2 million cases of final orders actually issued by courts for deportation
That's
that have
nearly,
gone through the system, and we haven't processed those.
that's
We haven't.
1.5% of the illegals in the country based on the numbers you gave me earlier.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty large number where they've made it through
Actually,
the system, and
yeah,
they said
that's
you need to get
10.5%.
out, and
Sorry, yeah.
we haven't shown them the exit.
Because if it's
To
2
me, that's
million, we said
ridiculous.
15. It's actually 15%. 15% of the illegals in the country have deportation orders, and they haven't left. That's a lot.
Another interesting part of this, we always talk about people who come through the border, not to change the due process. I think we both, from that standpoint, agree there should be a process. It should be legalized. We should let people know. Uh, Unfortunately, nobody's talking about that. So, again, that's a little bit concerning to me that we're sort of putting the cart before the horse. We should have the process first before we start, which, again, I think is a lot of what Trump does. I know he wants to move quick and break things, but
He wants to move quick because he knows his time is limited, and there's going to be all kinds of court cases stopping him. Right. So,
but that's the point, Bob. I think either we don't follow our principles as a country and our laws.
well, the courts
Just
are
to
there.
do,
The courts are the backstop there, right?
he's using a 1798 law that was not intended. He's claiming we've been invaded,
Well, okay.
like we've been invaded from a foreign land. I mean,
well,
this is what he's using.
What would you call?
This
what
is
would
our
you
laws
call
that he's using.
200,000 people a month coming over the
It's
border
not
illegally.
it's not an organized, and I don't think the courts. I think a ruling of the
there's
court saying
caravans,
it's not an
tens of
organized
thousands
invasion from a foreign country. That's what this was intended to do.
10,000 people deep coming over our
not-
border in these caravans.
it's not-
pretty organized. It's very
it's not-
organized.
The courts aren't agreeing with that interpretation. So I'm not saying other
The courts are basically saying
we have to follow our
it still
laws
needs to be,
and our
it still
constitution.
needs to work its way through the system. All the courts have said is, you got to let this work its way through the system. They're not saying that
Right,
Trump's interpretation of the law is wrong. They're just saying it's not. We're not sure yet.
Well, you just said they're stopping him. Do you
But
not
the argument
agree
that the
he
laws
should be
from
stopped?
1798 sure doesn't invalidate it either.
Yeah, right.
Well, how old's the First Amendment?
Well, I think it's more the intent of the law than whether it's still valid or not. But my point is, we should do this through our principles as a country, rather than lose all of our principles as a country as part of doing this.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that.
It's a bit off topic,
and I
but
think
we are down that path already, and it was prior to Trump of
I understand.
losing values.
And I think we should offer a path to citizenship for people who are more established here. Not the recent flow, but I mean, if they've been paying taxes, if they've been at a job for 20 years, there's a lot of. We haven't talked about it, but I looked up data on people who've overstayed their visas, or people who just come here, on a tourist visa or a work visa and then never leave. That's a big number too. That's like, where's my number? And so you don't want a path to citizenship for anyone. If they got here illegally.
Well, they can take the same path that everybody else has to. They can.
So they got to leave first?
They got to leave and come do it properly.
Okay. So you don't want to.
Because they've been paying taxes 30 years. I mean, they've been using our roads. They've been using our schools. They've been using our healthcare system.
But we've let them stay here. They've established themselves. They've had children. They've bought houses. We've let them do it. Let's see.
Yeah, well, a lot of people let a lot of people do things. It doesn't necessarily make it right, and it doesn't make it legal.
Yeah, but we've let them do it. So overstays. There are.
If
there's a half
just because I let you in my house on Monday, doesn't mean I want you showing up at my door on Tuesday at 11 o'clock and just walking in while I'm trying to sleep. I'm not going to, just because I let you in.
So we don't take any responsibility
in the middle of the night. No.
We don't.
They came in illegally.
So somebody who's been here 20 years, we don't take any, as a country, we don't owe them anything.
Correct.
Okay. I don't agree with that. I think
there may be a path that I can find the middle ground in. Maybe it's a fine of, I don't know, $10, $20,000 a year.
I'm not saying that we're not going to make them pay for the citizenship. I'm just saying they should be given a path to it.
That brings up the gold card. I wonder how many of those have been bought. I haven't seen those numbers. You know what I'm talking about?
Right, yeah. I have no problem saying, okay.
We should establish some kind of gold card. It's $5 million by citizenship in the country. And the first one, I think he bought himself, and that was about a month and a half ago, and I haven't heard anything on that.
And he gave it away to his nanny, or he doesn't have
I don't know what he did with it. I don't know.
So
I think he sent it in the mail to Barack. I'm not sure.
So of the 15 million people, there's 500,000 that are just overstays, that have just overstayed their visa. It's still a pretty significant number.
Yeah, that doesn't make it right. What do you think would happen if I went and overstayed my visa in Mexico for 20 years?
You'd be
Germany.
You'd be eating a lot of tacos and drinking a lot of Corona. You'd be a happy guy.
And then I went and started working, taking their jobs. Do you think that would be handled the way we're doing it? Pick any country in the world.
Yeah. I think the immigration problem, speaking of any other country in the world, I don't think it's unique to the U.S. And my guess is we need to solve this now because I don't see it changing, especially, they talk about climate changing, increasing net immigration flows in and out of countries. Climate immigrants, I don't know if we've seen that much of that so far, but definitely I think the world is getting smaller and people have the ability to move and migrate. So I think we need to kind of solve this. But like I said, where's the comprehensive immigration bill? If Trump said, I'm going to push through a comprehensive bill, I'm going to take care of these problems immediately, and then we're going to have a comprehensive bill, bipartisan, we're going to resurrect that, I'd be much more comfortable with what we're doing. Now it seems like we're just using Band-Aids, and whoever comes in next, the problem can rear its head again, and then we're spending a lot of resources getting people out, right?
What did the last guy do? What did the guy before him do? What did the guy before him do? What did the guy before? Trump is doing something different, right? So the reason we're having this conversation is because Trump is doing something. That's the thing. Now, you and I, we're kind of odd. We've probably been talking about this for years. The point is, Trump's doing something. It's forcing a shift. Nobody else has done anything. So
maybe they haven't done anything because they were respecting our laws, but I don't know.
They were flying people into the country illegally and then
our values,
shipping them into different cities.
And our values.
Not respecting laws or values.
Oh, that's totally allowed by the president. He didn't violate any laws doing that. That's an authority. If you look it up, that's an authority that he had to do. You might not agree with it. I don't agree with it, but that wasn't illegal. And so don't say that was illegal.
I bet it's illegal. I bet it's illegal for Trump to buy 1 million guns and ship them into Chicago. And his argument would be need to protect the community from this invasion that's happening. I bet it's completely legal. You think Chicago would be okay with it? So why? No, they would not. So why is it okay?
Well, you said it was illegal.
Joe Biden. No,
I'm just saying it wasn't legal. It wasn't illegal.
Why is it okay for Joe Biden to place millions of illegals in Texas?
That was only 300,000. There was only 300,000 total. So don't. 300,000. Under the parole program. Under the parole program.
Okay. Well, that's one group. 3 million came in. Okay, yes, that's true. But millions
I don't
came
think
into
he
the
did
country,
anything illegal.
and they were moved around the country.
But
right? It wasn't, again, it was catch and release, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But they weren't all just let stay there. They'd moved them. They were busing them or flying them from El Paso to Dallas or El Paso to New York.
Well, they need to put them somewhere, right? I mean, that
again,
was
they weren't asking in many cases the communities. They were
but that's our system, Bob. There, no community is going to want. What do you mean ask a community? No, we don't have detention centers set up, and we had an influx.
Who's going to pay for it?
And we had an influx of immigration. This happens across the world. I mean, I think that's a large reason for the shift to more conservative and to the right in many countries, and especially in Europe, was all the Syrian immigrants during the trouble in Syria. I mean, there's huge African immigrants into France. I mean, it's an issue not only for us.
And it's not a coincidence that crime is rising in a lot of those places too.
And it's not anything new. This has happened throughout history. My point is, let's create a system that can handle this going forward, rather than I support Trump getting away the criminals. I would like a process for the rest of everyone else. I don't think we should do away with due process. I think we have to be very careful about how we do it. I don't think we have to have a court hearing in 2 years. I think that's ridiculous. I think common sense tells you that system's broken. But I think we need to fix the system too. We can't just permanently shut our borders and then ship people out without due process. That's not the country I believe we are. And that's sort of what he's doing.
We need to find a fast way to get him out of here. I'm sympathetic to the due process argument, but I'm also not going to stand, idly and say, okay, let's let them work their way through the court system. That's going to take 3 to 24 months per illegal when you've got 20 million of them in here, right?
All right.
You can't do it. You can't.
I think we generally agree on a lot of this.
Generally.
I think I'm
I
a
lean
little
towards
bit more
expediency, and you're more cautious.
I am for expediency as long as we don't trash the Constitution and our laws. I'm probably a little bit more pro-immigration because I think it's good for business and economics. You're more worried about the effect on wages. So I think we sort of differ a little bit there. So I think that drives my more pro-immigration stance. But I think we should wrap up here, simply because we're trying to stay, a little shorter programs here. I think next time I would like to talk about, since we didn't talk about it here, and it gets into the court cases that you started mentioning, and we need to make the process quicker, is the birthright citizenship and the Supreme Court hearing from this week dealing with district judges making rulings on a nationwide basis. I think that could be the biggest Supreme Court ruling that we see during this whole term. And maybe they might have an opinion by the time we do another podcast.
That's a huge court case.
It's a huge court case because it really has an effect on what he's going to be able to do for the rest of his
and it's not just
term.
That. It really has an effect on more, right? Because where's the line drawn then? What makes you a citizen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's the birthright, and then it's the executive. It's kind of both wrapped into one. It's kind of an interesting case, and I think it's probably the biggest case that we're going to see.
I think the birthright citizenship will be upheld, but that's just my guess.
Yeah, I think that's the more minor of the two issues. I think the bigger issue is the way that we're going to take our judicial system here, especially as Trump is pushing the boundaries, and to see how much leeway the Supreme Court's going to give him. So we'll cover that next time. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think we did a decent job covering the ins and outs of immigration. Let us know what you think about this new format. Anything else, Bob?
You got anything you want us to cover? Let us know.
Yeah. If there's
What's our email address again?
It's sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com.
Or we've got an X account. It's the same, Sensible Center Pack. Or at Sensible Center Pack.
Right.
Good night.
And, and we'll also be covering, we'll get back into the political reforms and things like that on future podcasts and kind of go more in depth on some of the reform movements to kind of stay true to our principle here. But there's so much happening in the world, we think some of these issues are worth delving into further and trying to see if Bob and I can agree on anything. All right, Bob. We'll talk to you later. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.